Jewish Insights with Justin Pines on JBS is made possible in part by the clubs at Pearl River, New York, luxury rental communities for ages 55 and better, and the B.L. Manger Foundation.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. As you probably know by now, I spent 4 years working at the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America. I'm very, very grateful for my time there and the team that I was a part of there. And when I first was drawn to work there, I really knew Hartman as a consumer. I knew about the scholars and the public intellectuals that I heard speak at various conferences or listened to online, and I was drawn to being around them. But then once I joined Hartman, I discovered that as impressive as all the amazing scholars and public intellectuals is also the culture and the organization and how it's run. There's a commitment to excellence. There's a commitment to being nimble and flexible and anticipating and responding to change all around us. I was there through COVID and the way that they adapted to that. I was there for October 7th and the way they adapted to that. There's a commitment to creating opportunities for various talented individuals in all different ways to contribute to a larger team, to really feel like they're part of a large team that's trying to accomplish a mission. And there's also a culture where the people are super, super, like almost too nice, like the nicest people you'll ever spend time with. And what I discovered when I started working there is that one of the key people and the person who really sets the tone and leads the charge around thinking about culture and how that place functions is my guest today. Rachel Jacoby Rosenfield is the Chief Executive Officer at the Hartman Institute, where she leads the staff, shapes the vision, strategy, and growth, develops the culture, and oversees programs and operations. She has served in the field of Jewish education and social justice for more than 2 decades as an entrepreneur, an executive leader, and an educator. And I had the amazing merit of having her as my supervisor for I think my first 1.5 or 2 years at Hartman, where I learned so much from her, and I just told her all the time, what you're doing here needs to be exported. The world needs to hear about it, not just the Jewish world, but the broader world needs to know about what you're doing, because what you're doing is amazing, and people can learn from it. And now I have the merit, Rachel, to actually get to do that, to chat with you about it, and to bring it out into the world.
Well, it's a complete honor and pleasure to be here, and I'm like shepping nachas listening to you talk about your time at the Hartman Institute, and it's really special to be able to talk to someone who was inside the institute, who understood the culture, and who you really saw it animated you even when you were there, and I know that it's followed you where you've come next. So it makes me really happy, and and we talk about these things all the time. Sure. So this is how we do it.
Right. This is a chavruta that's become hopefully lifelong for us, and I'm very grateful to do it on TV for a bit. So I think the way I'm thinking about this is kind of the big question is creating culture. Mm-hmm. How do you center your purpose, who you are, what you're trying to become, and how you can be part of the whole? I think the way I'm thinking about the kind of our flight plan is I want to start with you, and then maybe we'll zoom out to how you think about doing it in your home, and then we'll zoom out and think about how you do it at Hartman and in workspaces in general. Right. So let's start with you. How do we get to where we are, Rachel? What drove you to go on this path?
Yes, so I grew up in Guilford, Connecticut, which at the time I grew up there, it now has a Chabad, which I find amusing, but at the time I grew up there, I really was one of the only Jewish kids in my elementary school, but my parents instilled in me somehow a really deep sense of Jewish identity. We had a chavurah in our home. They eventually founded the Reform Synagogue, that's in Madison, Connecticut now, and I had this sense of like deep Jewish selfhood, but no real understanding of community or content, and I longed for the rich depth. And so after college, I went to Israel, and that was my first time in Israel. I spent a total of 3 years in my 20s in Israel, learning Hebrew, learning Jewish studies at the Pardes Institute, volunteering on Otzma. I eventually went to UC Berkeley to pursue a doctorate in comparative literature with a focus on Hebrew, and then went into teaching and education as I became the mother of young children. You know, I worked in the social justice world for quite some time. I'm sure we'll touch on that. And coming to Hartman 10 years ago was like returning home. It was returning back to a place of ideas, to scholarship, to Jewish depth, to Jewish community. and at the same time, to the kind of Jewish scholarship that you don't find in the university so much, the kind of Jewish scholarship that actually shapes Jewish community, Jewish life. It's applied. And that felt so purposeful to me and so aligned with how I always thought about my own pursuit of learning and the purpose of my own Jewish learning. So I feel very fortunate to be working at a place where I personally feel so deeply aligned with the mission and the work itself. So,
beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get to Hartman in a second. I want to really just start with, you said a little bit about how you came to where you are. You know, I got a snapshot of you these past several years. A few things stand out to me, and I want to kind of, maybe by choosing to ask about those things, we can like open up a little bit. So one of the crazier things that I saw you do was take in a Ukrainian refugee family. And also that on its own is very powerful, but also given your own family's history and like going back to Ukraine, Holocaust times, that adds more layers. Kind of give us the background, what happened there, and then what drove that decision, and kind of what that was like for you.
Yeah, so when the war broke out in Ukraine, I mean, it feels like so long ago now, there's been too much news, unfortunately. But when the war broke out, I had a friend who I had met through a fellowship program through UJA Federation. It was called the Mulestein Fellowship. As part of the fellowship, they took us to Odessa and then to Israel to learn about Jewish communities still in Eastern Europe, and then, of course, to go to Israel. And this friend is originally from Odessa, speaks Ukrainian, and I brought a picture of my great-grandfather with me on the trip. On the back of the picture, there was an address, presumably of the place where the picture was taken. He must have been in his early 20s. It must have been around the early 20th century, 1905, 1906. I imagine he probably immigrated around there. And it might have been a passport picture, who knows? But she took me to the address of the place where the picture was taken, and it was this block of glassy stores, Abercrombie and Fitch and all the Western stores. And this one building was the original stucco, old-looking building that I could imagine my great-grandfather, who I obviously never knew, walking across the steps. So that was that moment. So fast forward, so this is in 2008, so fast forward to the outbreak of the war.
Right, and just play out the end of that. So what you know is that your family was there.
They were in Odessa, like many of our families.
Yeah.
I don't know much beyond that. I know that my great-grandfather came here, married my great-grandmother. This is my maternal line. And so that, really that was what I knew. I had this picture of him, Morris Vichovsky, and this address.
And at some point, like in the 10s or 20s of the 20th century, they made their way here.
They made their way here.
Okay.
They ended up in Albany, New York. So I'm not quite sure of what the whole chain of events were that led them there, but that's where my mother was born.
Got it.
So the war broke out, and this same friend was posting on social media that she had gone to the border to try to support the flood of Ukrainian refugees who were leaving, and buying them everything they needed, collecting money. So I just wrote her an email and said, when you come back, I'd love to just take you out for drinks and thank you for what you're doing. Because besides send tzedakah, I really didn't know what to do, but I felt a connection. I felt this sense of, these are people who are under conditions of war, who are looking for a safe place, who have to pick up and leave. And I felt such deep empathy. And so I met this friend, and I said to her in kind of an offhand way, I'm an empty nester. My two grown kids are off. We got rooms. We live in North Riverdale. I don't know how attractive that is for anyone, but if anyone needs help, we're here.
Yeah. Wow.
3 days later, she texted me, there's a family.
Oh my God.
There's a family who came, two parents and a 1.5-year-old. They have no place to go. They want to be in New York because they think they'll be able to find jobs here. Would you host them? So I reached out to them, and they came over to visit, and they moved in 2 days later. And they lived with us for 6 months.
Wow. We're a couple years later now. I'm curious how are they? Are they here?
They're here. They're here. They're here under humanitarian parole, which is a special category that allows people to stay here and to work, to have social security numbers, to pay taxes, but gives them no pathway to staying beyond the expiration date of the temporary parole. Just before leaving office, Biden extended temporary parole for Ukrainian refugees by 18 months. I don't know whether that will hold or not. So yes, they're here. They're still living in Riverdale. They love it. Apparently, Riverdale reminds them of Kharkiv. The little one is closing in on 5.
Wow.
She's speaking English, Ukrainian, and Russian. I don't have grandchildren, but I'd imagine that some of the feelings I have towards her are what I'll feel towards a grandchild.
Wow.
She calls me my Rachel. Mm-hmm. And you know, I know that I can't keep them safe, you know, and there's all kinds of events and policies that will impact them, but for now they're both working, and actually the mother is pregnant.
Oh wow. All right, as we say, Bishal Tova, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'll add, I remember you losing sleep at some point over the fact that there was some government thing you were going through trying to renew and extend, and I guess it was successful.
It was successful.
Amazing. I'm happy to hear that. And just to kind of zoom out to our larger theme here, like what drives that for you?
What drove that? I think that I take very seriously the things that I live as a Jew. So when I say on Passover, let all who are hungry come and eat, that to me feels like a habit of mind and heart. And so it just felt so obvious to me at that moment when I was talking to this friend that would be the kind of thing that would be demanded of me and that I should do. And I also had this idea, I have no idea if it's true or not, that the only way that my great-grandfather could have come to this country not speaking English, probably very poor, probably not very skilled, and survived, and then had, you know, now me and my brother, who are, you know, both have graduate degrees, and my cousins, that was through the help of strangers, through some people making some choices to be kind and to be helpful in the ways that they could. And so I'm paying it back. I'm also paying it forward, I hope, lest there ever be another time, God forbid, when our people needs this.
Right. Well, that opens up a whole conversation. I'll bite. Actually, I'll bite because I'm curious now. Yeah. I know, you know, this I think is another area that I know you went through some, let's say, learning pains, or let's call it, which I feel like a lot of after October 7th, you're someone who I think has been an ally across multiple cultural groups and really putting yourself out there to help others, and kind of had this moment where like, my phone's not ringing, no one's reaching out to me.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't talked to you about that since I think October of 23. Just say a little bit about, you know, reflecting on that and where you are on that question these days also. This idea of like, we'll be nice to others and hopefully in our time of need, they'll be nice back to us.
You know, our colleague, Yehuda Kurtzer, says something really smart about this that's really stuck with me, which is to say, you know, before you jump to conclusions about, you know, this person didn't reach out to you or feel hurt or feel somehow unseen, to think about whether you made your commitments explicit to that person. Does that person really understand your connection to the state of Israel and to the Jewish people? Peoplehood's a hard concept for people who don't feel it. Have you made explicit how important this is to you? So once I realized that, I actually just made a round of phone calls telling the people who I wished had reached out to me what this meant to me, making it explicit, making my connection explicit. Like that was on me to do. Now after that, the extent to which people have, and some people have, you know, reached out again and at various painful points and have been supportive, but you know, there are people who now understand those commitments and who don't agree with them or who have issues with them or who, for whom that is not their first priority. And you know, that may be disappointing, but that's, you know, again, it's like, what can I do within my own circle of influence to actually try to make things right, to try to make a difference, to try to have my own commitments be clear both to myself and to the people around me. And then whether people pick up on that and whether people follow through on that, I think that's on them.
Beautiful. Yeah, we had Rabbi David Ingber talk about how, looking back, he realized that, you know, perhaps liberal Jews a little bit checked their Judaism and their Zionism at the door when they went into other spaces to focus on helping others, and they didn't say it explicitly. So hearing you say that is beautiful. And we had Mark Schneier talk about MLK's like love of Israel and fighting anti-Semitism, because it was really clear the people he was working with, these are our commitments, we're working together. So this important reminder of we need to wear our commitments explicitly, even when going to help others.
And that's right. I just heard Van Jones speak. He was in conversation with Mark Baker, who's the CEO of CJP,
Sure.
also my brother-in-law for sake of full disclosure. And it was a really compelling conversation, partly because what became clear to me was that part of the reason why Van Jones showed up at the rally in DC last November was because he had spoken to enough Jews and listened well enough to understand our commitments and to understand our history and our suffering and our pain and what this would mean. And he really took it in. And that empathy is what got him to go and speak at a moment when I think a lot of people were discouraging him from doing so.
Right. Beautiful. And we had my colleague Jonah Platt had Van Jones on as well, and we got a little bit of that. Thank you for referencing that. Okay, so we went off our tangent there, which I think we had to, but I want to come back. Yeah. You know, what you did with Ukrainian refugees is you stepped in and took something on. I want to kind of go to it, what I think is, I thought that was very like, wow, I can't believe she did that. But then another event happened that I was your colleague at the time when it happened, when you had this kind of, I want to be respectful in bringing it up, but you were assaulted, for lack of a better term. You could describe it yourself in Riverdale.
Yeah.
And I'll say the punchline, then I want you to unpack it, which was, I think, I was, very upset for you, and then hearing you kind of say, I hope they don't end up in jail, I hope this doesn't ruin their life, like really caught me by surprise and was not like the type of language I'm used to hearing from people. So, to the extent you're comfortable sharing what happened, but also sharing kind of what your thoughts were on that experience and now looking back as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think about it a lot anymore, but I was mugged. Yeah. I was parked near my home. I was walking from my car to my house, and 3 large humans, turns out they were teenagers, which is part of the story, but very young teenagers. They surrounded me and took my stuff and told me to get down on the ground. I wasn't sure whether or not they had a weapon. It wasn't clear. Anyway, they did the same thing to someone else a few days later. Actually were violent towards him, hit him with a pipe, and they were apprehended. Part of the reason they were able to arrest them, incidentally, was because they took my phone and they were able to track them, and they were wearing my coat.
Oh my God.
So it was clear to me, even from that point, that these are not seasoned criminals. Yeah. And then it turned out that they were 3 boys who were foster children in the same home in South Yonkers, all in their early teens, 14, 15 years old. And I kept thinking about, like, what is the 14 or 15 years these kids lived that they ended up doing that to me? Mm-hmm. Like, what led to that? And so I guess what I was feeling, Justin, was, I was just aware that the criminal justice system isn't necessarily designed to help people who are calling out for help through committing a crime, which is one way to interpret it, to give them the help that they need. And so that was part of what I tried to speak up for. Listen, I was very angry and upset and hurt.
Yeah.
And I also felt like, well, what's the best possible outcome? The best possible outcome is that these young people never do that again, and that they become self-respecting, good citizens of the world. So how does that happen? Mm-hmm. I don't think it happens by them going to juvie. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what happened to them.
Wow. I'll say, you said it the first time, that kind of thinking back on the Passover story, the obligation you felt towards these Ukrainian refugees. But I'll say, like, when I hear you describe like that, I think of it as like God being forgiving, like that kind of thing, kind of saying like, okay, you've messed up, but I want what's best for you, and I'm not going to hold that against you, which is like super high level, Rachel, to like have that mindset, and just be like, to step aside, because I think like you were mugged, right? Like, I'm sure there was a lot of emotions going on, and to be able to like somehow navigate that and say, let me be empathetic towards these people who did this to me.
They were kids.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I'll sit with that a little bit. I think there's a very powerful lesson there. So thank you for sharing it. And I won't debate. I don't even know what I feel. I think I'm just blown away by that choice. I'll go a little bit lighter for a second, and we're just jumping around here a little bit. Another thing that you're at least known for in the Hartman circles is your personal practice of note-taking.
Oh yeah.
Which is wild. Like, you have this, I wish you had it with you. I should have had you bring it onto TV, but you have kind of one of these like nicer looking notebooks that has everything's in different colors, which I feel like also reflects like an approach to life in some way and a culture of yours that's also personal. Say a little bit about that.
Okay, so there's no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
I like to write things down. I have a visual memory. So if I put them in colors, I remember what I wrote because I can remember that, like, oh, the thing I wrote in green on the upper left-hand side. It just works for me.
There's no system. It's not like this is like these things are green, these things are pink.
Like, which marker do I feel like using right now?
Oh my God, that's amazing.
There's no system. There's no system. I just for me, that's how I remember things and can find things.
Wow.
I have them all. I save them all. It's like I don't know that I'll ever go back to them, but it's fun to have them. My father, who was a scientist, a research scientist, was also a painter. He started painting when he was in his 40s, and now he's in his mid 80s and is still painting and just had a show. And my aunt, his sister, is also a professional artist, and I think there's something about color and like a visual medium that works with my brain.
Wow.
I mean, you also know that when I'm planning something, I take these huge Post-its and I put them on the wall and I write all over them in different colors. Again, no rhyme or reason, and it's not particularly aesthetically pleasing, but it works for me as a creative process.
Right. I definitely have that image of your glass wall of your office with lots of massive Post-its in different colors. I never knew that the colors did not
they don't mean anything.
That's fascinating. No. Especially in today's world where everyone's like throw everything into like Google Docs and you can search and find that word in 1 second, but you're connecting to it in a different way.
Green.
Yeah.
You can find that.
Top left, green.
Yeah.
Just flip to that page.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe I'll use that as a transition into another tool of your journaling. I want to talk about your kids more broadly and like how you think about raising kids. But one thing that I want everyone to learn, and if they have the courage to take it on, I think is cool, is you have a journal of your kids' memories or things they do, basically, right? Tell me a little about that.
Well, the kids call it their funny book.
Okay.
They are now almost 25 and 22.
Yeah.
But yeah, when the kids were little, I mean, I think a lot of people do this. I wrote down things they said and did that were cute, but then we had this ritual of opening them up on their birthdays and reading they're now famous passages to them. Yeah. And you know, now when the girlfriend's around or the boyfriend's around, it's pretty hilarious. Yeah. And they love it. But you know, my husband one-upped me in this category because he started a ritual of writing them a birthday letter every single year on their birthday, and he still does it. Every year he's like, oh, it's almost April 17th, I have to write the birthday letter. Yeah. And for their B'nai Mitzvah, he gave them a book of all the birthday letters to date. So I think just something, like having, you know, I stopped taking notes after a while, and definitely number 2 got fewer notes than number one. But I think having anything that helps to ground you in who that little person was and connect it to who they are and help them to see those connections. Look how funny you always were. Look at how thoughtful you always were. Look how verbal you always were. Those are fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the throes of it, right? I'm 9, 7, turning 5 and turning 3, and I think certainly in my circles, it's a lot of just snap as many pictures as possible, and we'll go through the photo album later. And this is like a very different practice. And I think also I feel that slipping away sometimes, where sometimes I can't even remember which kid did that funny thing happen with, or like,
it does slip away.
You can't even go back to and remember it. Like every once in a while, like something will trigger a memory, like, oh, you used to love this song or something like that, but I don't like have it in a way that we can look back on. And I think it's a really beautiful practice to just like how did you did it? How often? Not to get like
when it occurred to me. Right. Honestly, the spaces get wider and wider as the kids got older. But there weren't digital media when the kids were really little. Right. My kids were born in 2000 and 2002, so I didn't have a cell phone, or at least not one that took pictures.
Sure.
So I didn't have another way to capture just on an ongoing basis those moments. I didn't set up an email account for them and email them, which I know people do. Right. I just wrote them down. And in some ways it kept it like it's a manageable amount of stuff. It's like, these are the stories. These are the 10 stories that we tell again and again and again.
That's really cute.
And they're beautiful. They're fun.
So zoom out just more broadly. You know, how do you think about? We're talking about this theme of creating culture and centering purpose. Yeah. How I know that your kids, it's been a journey already, right? They're in their 20s, but how have you thought, and as they transition into being adults as well, like how do you think about doing that in your home?
Creating purpose. I mean, part of by modeling. Listen, I think Paul and I, my husband and I, both have careers that we've chosen that are very, very purposeful. We have a clear connection between what we do and what we care about and what we say we care about, and so there's just an alignment. And so I think there's always a practice of aligning. And we do this in organizational culture also. Just had staff retreat. It's an exercise in aligning the staff, getting clear on what our purpose is, the reason we're each here, and then how are we going to move towards the mission we want to achieve together. We can do that in a family. Who are we as a family? What are the things we care about? How do we want to demonstrate that? Those are conversations we've had with our children. Who are you as a human? What are the things you care about? What do you want to study? Yes, because it attracts you and it's intellectually stimulating and whatnot, but what do you want to be doing? What feels like, not a calling in the religious sense, but what just feels like your service that you were created to do? What is and there's not just one thing, but what's a thing that if you did this thing, it would feel fulfilling to you and would also feel like you were living into something that was bigger than you, into a purpose that you care about. And I think that's for me anyway, the work of what it means to be a human being. It means, it's from raising a child to become who they need to be in the world and feel fulfilled and creatively realized and like their life has meaning and purpose, and to be a family of such, and frankly, to be an organization of such.
Wow. Help me with respect to the privacy of your family, which I want to respect fully.
Yeah.
Can you take me I guess I have two questions. One is is it you have the 5 principles on the wall on a big sticky in the kitchen? They're like, guys, don't forget. We do, how do you actually I have kids. It's not I assume you're not doing that every night.
No.
Is it you try to catch that moment to have that conversation? Or you're like, wow, I really need to help this child with that. How do you think about that? And then also if you could share practical examples of how that plays out in a conversation or a decision or something like that.
Great. So my daughter, she right now, she earned a master's in public health. She took a 5th year and earned that. She's been crazy about public health before anyone knew what public health was. She had chosen that as a major, and she just knew that she was drawn to it. She liked the interdisciplinary aspect of it. She liked that it was a way to actually help people on a systemic level and not just on an individual level. And she won't say this, but her grandfather was a public health expert. He was the dean of the School of Public Health at Columbia, and there's definitely something there. There's some connection there. We've had a lot of conversations about, well, who is it you want to be? I get who you want to be for the next 5 years, but in 10 years from now, what do you want to have? What do you think you want to have done, or what parts of yourself do you hope to use? And these are the kinds of conversations we're having because, as I've said to her a million times, you can only make decisions with the information you have at any given point.
Sure.
And so the most information you have is about what you care about, and so work from that place.
And then, I know where you are now, but zooming back a little bit, right? Were your kids I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a professional athlete, that kind of stuff, and you were
my aunt wanted to be a farmer and a hairdresser.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then were you what about public health? Or at a certain point how does that transition?
No, then the question is but why?
Yeah.
Why do you want to be a farmer and a hairdresser? Oh, because I really care about, So it's the values. It doesn't matter what the thing is.
Right, and you're trying to
it's about it's about them noticing what are the values that animate their choices and their proclivities.
That's very interesting. Okay, cool. And I guess you bring practical into it in some way at some point along the journey, or they figure it
there are tuition bills.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, there are practical matters.
Right. Okay, wow, beautiful. All right, and then one more while we're staying in the family space. I know you've written about this before and you've told me about it, but share this idea of the Elul book title practice that you do.
Yes.
What is that? These are, guys, this is all free. We're giving you all these free things to do in your home. Gifts from Rachel. Take on what you can take on.
I always feel self-help books should actually be pamphlets because generally there's one good idea in each one. So you're getting all my one good.
I'm trying to export Rachel to the world. It's these are gifts. These are treasures.
So we have a family tradition I don't even know how old it is now. It's decades old. Where Rosh Hashanah lunch, we gather as an extended family, not just the nuclear, but the cousins and the aunts and uncles, and we choose our book title for the year. And of course, this is riffing off the notion that every Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, we are written into the book of life, God willing, and that. So what is that book? What is that book for each of us
What's
this
it
year?
Called this year?
What's it called? What's the title? And sometimes it'll be a title. Sometimes it'll be a chapter that builds on last year's title. But we all get 10, 15 minutes to kind of tease out, here's where I think I'm going. What do y'all think? Usually we come up with a Hebrew version as well as the English version. And then the next year, sometimes we remember what our titles were, sometimes we don't. But the idea is that it creates a moment of intention of setting an intention for the year ahead, and also hearing everyone else's intentions and some level of accountability. And now that the kids participate too, so now the youngest one is 15. It's incredible. So this is another moment of connecting kids to their purpose,
right.
Asking them to come up with their book title for the year, and their titles are so insightful and so connected to the struggles of the year before. It's an amazing practice. I highly recommend it.
It sounds amazing. Can I trouble you again with respect to the privacy of your family?
Yes.
If there are some examples you remember and feel comfortable sharing.
Sure. Well, Paul has kind of a famous one. No, I can't do that to him. I'll erase that. Okay. So examples. Mine. It's interesting. Mine a couple of years ago was 30,000 feet. Mm-hmm. Because at work, I felt that I wanted to get up like an airplane. I wanted to get up above the work in a new way and see it from a new perspective. My aunt, who's an artist, has this Torah where she basically says, like, if you need to understand something, just like stand in a different spot. Just stand in a different spot.
Sure.
So what does it mean to get up above? So 30,000 feet was my book title actually for a few years in a row.
Wow.
Because I felt like I wasn't done looking around.
Yeah.
So that's an example.
Okay.
And then, people would come up with fun names for it, like, how about if it's El Al, just fun.
To do the flavor, what a beautiful practice. And again, I love the piece, which is that it's this practice on its own, but it still ties into this larger practice of like helping yourself as an adult and the children really clarify their purpose, their short-term purpose, their long-term purpose, keep coming back to that, keep focusing on the purpose.
Yeah, and I just want to say purpose shifts. It's okay, like purpose isn't a reified thing. So I think it's really about the muscles around asking yourself, well, why? What are my values? What is it I have to give, that I need to exercise inside myself? And then moving forward.
Right, and it's interesting you raised that up, but maybe we'll use that to transition into Hartman for a little bit. One of the many, many ideas that are always catchy to remember from Hartman is this idea of the Judaism of being and the Judaism of becoming. That Judaism, on one hand, it feels like a family, and other times it feels like it's a mission. And I'm someone, as you know, grandchild of survivors. The Pew study over and over says, the things that Jews most identify with across the board is never letting the Holocaust happen again.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the knocks I have on how we led over the past, whatever it is, 3/4 of a century, was a sense that we need to protect Jewish bodies and make sure they're safe. And there's been like a missing, and what's the Jewish mission? Why are we protecting Jewish bodies? What is it that we're here for? Is it Jewish bodies are equal to anyone else, so they should just deserve protection, which is true, or is there a unique Jewish mission, a mission of individuals within the Jewish community? And I feel like often we don't spend time enough on that mission. And so doing that in your personal life and now with your family, and now we'll transition into how you do it at work. So first I'll just ask you, hopefully a softball. Let's just start with, when you think about Hartman, what is the mission? What is the broader mission of the group? And then we'll talk about how you build a culture that can help you accomplish that mission.
Great. So, so the Hartman Institute is an organization that brings together the greatest researchers and the greatest educators in order to build a Judaism of moral and spiritual excellence. That is what we seek to do. And we have some definitions of what that means. It means enriching the relationship between North American Jewry and Israel. It means deepening an understanding and a commitment to pluralism and to the Jewish and democratic character of the state of Israel. Sure. These are the core values that we are trying to advance in the world. And so when you talk about vision, try to imagine, what would it look like? What would it look like to have a Jewish life of moral and spiritual excellence? What would that actually look like? What would you get up in the morning and do differently? What would your synagogue look like? What would your Jewish day schools look like? Your Jewish leaders, who would they need to be? What would they need to model and bring to the conversation? That's the vision question, right? Like, what is it we can achieve? And I think we have some really exciting ideas about that. In the last 80 years of Jewish life in North America have been a vision into what Jewish life can look like in the diaspora that our ancestors could not have imagined. Right? So we got to experience something really, really special. So then what's the next iteration of that? I know there are a lot of challenges, and at Hartman we take those challenges very seriously. Our research is designed around confronting those challenges and bringing Jewish wisdom to bear on those challenges. But then you need also the vision. the sort of defensive crouch, but also the aspirational move. And it's really balancing between those. And we can't, even in a time when anti-Semitism is at an all-time high and there's a war and we're worried we just want those hostages home and we just want our soldiers home and all of that, there's still a question, in some ways the most important question is like, but who are we? Who do we want to be? And that's up to us.
Beautiful. And right, first of all, I love that. I'm familiar with it, obviously, a little bit. But I guess my follow-up to that beautiful description is kind of sitting where you sit, right? So there's this thing you're trying to do in the world. How do you think about constructing and leading the organization on the inside? And we can, I guess, start at 10,000 feet. What are kind of the big picture things you're thinking about? And then we can get into the specifics of how you make that happen.
10,000 feet. Listen, we have a really clear mission statement. We actually used it as a text and studied it as like a text study at our last staff retreat. Beautiful. Because the mission's clear. Our work, our work is clear. So let's all really internalize it. And then we spend time thinking about how our particular roles within the organization help to advance that work. There's the apocryphal tale about the NASA janitor. I don't know if you've ever heard this one. Yeah, when asked, what is his job at NASA? He said, I get rockets to the moon because I have to keep things clean. If things aren't clean, then there could be a piece of dust and that could affect the Challenger and whatever. Sure. So it's that sense of, we're all getting rockets to the moon. We're all needing to be in a place of aspiring towards a shared vision and working and seeing our personal work as contributing to that in very meaningful ways. So how I lead the organization is I first of all try to remind people of that and try to give them a sense of the story of the work that we're doing. Culture is all about narrative. What's the story we want to tell about who we are, where we've come from, the challenges we've overcome, what we've done effectively in the past, what our vision is for where we're going, what the challenges are to get there, and how we're going to do it. Like it's the Exodus story, right? Right. One of my favorite leadership books is Managing Transitions by William Bridges. Okay. He talks about how when you're in a transition, there's a period between when you leave the old thing and you get to the new thing. And he calls that the neutral zone. But what I love the most is then he talks about the Exodus narrative as being a metaphor for the neutral zone. That we all like when we're going through a change, a job change, a life change, graduating, whether it's a good thing or not a good thing, we're leaving something behind. There's a loss, and we're moving towards something new, and it doesn't happen all at once, like the flipping a switch. There's a period of learning and growth.
In the midbar.
In the midbar. Yeah. Right, in the desert. Right. Wow. So I think it's like about understanding that organizations are places where we're constantly in different deserts. There's constantly different transitions happening. And how are we telling the story about where we were, where we're going, and our own resilience and our own vision?
And bring everyone with you.
And bringing everyone with you. You got to stay out ahead, right? Like the cloud, the pillar of clouds, but you can't get so far ahead that the people behind you feel like they've lost their way.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that really blew me away also when I was working at Hartman was how nimble it was, right? It's this research-based institution doing all this research that's like people are meeting every other week for like years to develop ideas, and at the same time it's like constantly changing and evolving. There's no we did it this way yesterday, so we're doing it that way again. It's new. I mean, I served in 3 different roles over 4 years there because we were just constantly like, this is the next thing we're doing. We know we're moving from this to this. Here's the new thing. And it was just, let's get all these talented people in a room kind of, and like they're on board with the mission, and we're just helping them reach their potential in new different ways, given the needs and where we're going as an organization.
Yep.
Beautiful. So tell me a little bit around how you do that practically a little bit. I think, the example that comes to my mind is when you lead retreats. That feels like a very high level example of that. I know that's something that everyone tries to do well. A lot of retreats people roll their eyes at, and at Hartman it seems to be this thing that people look forward to and get a ton out of and feel very energized by the end. a retreat is coming. What's your mindset? How do you think about that process? And what do you try to do there?
Great. So it starts 6 months ahead of time, where I notice.
Pause. 6 months ahead of time. Holy cow!
It starts 6 months. You don't just
It's tonight. Who's here, right?
No,
6 months.
You don't just get up one morning and say the retreat's next week. I wonder what a fun icebreaker would be.
Right.
No, it starts 6 months ahead of time, really looking around and noticing. First of all, what are the stories we're telling ourselves at this organization? Is there a story about who needs to approve everything? Is there a story about where the work gets stuck? And which of these stories are actually things that we need to address and fix? And which of them actually have to do with certain ways of thinking that are getting in our way, right? So noticing that. Noticing, someone taught me once that complaints are often disguised requests. I met with a group of the early career professionals, and I listened to them. I gave them some prompts ahead of time, and then I just listened to them.
Sure.
And afterwards, I was able to take everything they said, whether it was a critique or an observation or a complaint, and turn them all into questions. They were all questions or requests. When can we fail? Is it safe to fail? What's our pathway towards growth? How do we know when it's time for us to grow? How can we learn the skills that we need to go forward, et cetera? So I start that process way ahead of time because I need to understand where people are at and to help them get aligned behind the leadership and with the vision. And I also need where they are to influence the leadership and the vision. Sure. So there's a lot of listening. There's groups, small groups, there's one-on-one, there's noticing in the hallways, there's noticing the times that are tense and trying to unpack what's happening there, and then starting to isolate, what are the places that we need to work on right now in order to end up in a state of realignment where we know where we're going, we understand our purpose, and we understand what each person's role is. That's the vision for where I'm trying to go. Wow. So I'm listening for that.
And so is that the goal of all retreats, and they just manifest themselves differently?
More or less. I mean, we do one retreat a year, and so there's always drift.
Right, sorry, right. There's like board retreats, and then there's also staff retreats.
Yeah, staff retreat. So the staff retreat happens once a year. And so, yes, it's always an alignment exercise to some extent. It's also a learning exercise. We're a place of learning. We learn together, and we learn ideas together. And it's also skills building and networking. It's all of those things. It's also where we launch our whole educational vision process for designing the more than 1,000 programs that we'll do over the course of the following academic year. So there are some very practical launch moments that happen at the retreat. But from my perspective, if you don't have this moment where you're aligning everyone behind the work and what the vision is and what the goals are, you can't get there. You can't get there in a way that is aspirational, that's asking the best from people, and that's truly as creative and meaningful as it could be, impactful.
Beautiful. Okay, great. I think that's really, I hope, takes people into that process a little bit. And then I'll just add, as someone who was there, there's also all these features of it, right? Like there's different ways of being in there. You guys are very thoughtful about I don't know what you call it, the pedagogical approaches, right?
Pedagogy,
You're using markers and writing on walls sometimes, you're sitting in circles, you're standing in a circle, you're like all these different pieces also. Like what's going on there for you?
People, lots of different kinds of learners, lots of different ages. I mean, when I started 10 years ago, we were 15 staff. This last retreat, there were 75 people there.
Wow.
65 plus 10 from Israel. So, you got to move people around. You got to get them talking to people they don't normally speak with, and so different kinds of learners, different ages, different moods. You want to create environment. So all that.
Okay, and then moving beyond the retreat again, you gave us some highlights of other areas of your life. What are some other kind of tools you think about that you employ over the course of a year to think about helping people align with their culture, with the purpose and the broader culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what performance review is about. The way we do it at Hartman anyway, performance review starts with a self-review, where you look at your goals from the last year and you write about your own reflections, and then your supervisor writes a response. We also, we do 360 processes. So there's lots of ways of getting feedback from each other. I think that's another really important kind of moment in the year. But it's happening constantly. I mean, I think I said this to someone earlier today who was about to go to a different job in a different place. He's a real success story. He's done a great job at the Institute, and we're proud when people go on to do great things after time with us. I said, you have to model in your own being every day the way you want this organization to be and to look and to act. And that means that it starts with you. And if you notice that you're having a hard time getting something done or getting through to someone or thinking at a higher level, that's data about where the organization is. And that means that you have to go back and think about how you are going to work to elevate everyone, not just the person you're interacting with at that moment.
Okay, one more question on this topic, and then I want to keep moving.
Yeah.
Which is, I was there for several big moments, right? There was like COVID, October 7th. There have been other things bigger and smaller, and I know that like when those things happen, sitting in your leadership position, right? There's this moment, I guess, like you guys do a lot of creating space to process it, but also a lot of thinking how we're going to be different. You know, how does that process happen? Something big happens that you feel like, oh, this is big. This is going to shape our organization. There's things going on here. People are dealing with it personally, all those things. What's the process for that?
The question is amazing, because like who would have even thought to ask, like, what do you do when there's a pandemic?
Right, but now it seems like every other year there's some insane emergency in the world.
I mean, I can tell you in that moment where that was happening, I thought of a few things. The first was, I remembered somehow to tell everyone to take their computers home, even though it wasn't a done deal that we were gonna have to stay home. In fact, I went back the next day and got all the plants.
I remember that.
Because I was like, what if we have to, I thought, what if we're out of the office and everyone comes back and they're all dead plants? How depressing would that be?
Rachel
I brought the plants.
Oh my God.
So some of it is just whatever, crazy thoughts happen in that moment. But I remember sitting at home thinking to myself, I'm a leader by walking around. A manager by walking around, that's a thing, the initials for it or something. How am I going to do this? How am I going to know how people are when I can't read their body language after a meeting or can't just have a conversation with them? I felt like I had my hands tied behind my back. And it took me a while to figure out some other ways to do that. So that was part of it from like a culture perspective. From a Hartman, ideas perspective, we immediately said to ourselves, like, this is, I don't care what Torah you are planning to teach, this is what we need to be focusing on now, and people's lives and families come first. We're going to do everything we can to hold on to everyone, and we did. We're not, we're going to, even if it's a difficult fundraising climate, and the Torah we're going to teach is going to be the Torah of this moment, and we're going to adapt. And as you well know, we were approached by several camps that didn't know what to do with their campers that summer, and you ran an incredible 5-week online program for campers that actually ended up being the proof of concept for a program we now run for teens that has over 330 teens from all over the country participating, not just online, but in real life. So that was an incredibly challenging and scary moment for all of the reasons that all of us remember. And it was a moment that, because we allowed ourselves to be nimble and to think about what people would really need that was aligned with our mission and vision, we were able to meet the moment in all kinds of ways. And then that meeting the moment led us to other innovations that have been really critical to our growth.
Beautiful. All right, I want to pick up on the saving the trees piece of it. So one of my memories from Hartman, or saving the plants, I should say, which I will literally never forget, was there was some sort of climate march of some kind, maybe in New York, maybe I don't remember the details. And I remember I remember our colleague Dan Friedman taking a vacation day to go to a climate march, and we're all live in our little echo chambers. I certainly am not around people who are talking about climate. I know that's in some circles that's hard to imagine, but that's not a topic at Shabbat tables or in sermons, or there's no one like, we need to save the climate, which I know a big part of the world are very focused on that. But it just hit me in the face like, wow, this is like, people care about this and they're using vacation days not to go on vacation but to go do climate stuff. We're in the month of Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is around the corner. I know this is an area of interest of yours. Just say a little bit around your connection to this. I know you've done past work in this. Just talk to me about your thoughts and feelings and what you want people to know about what's happening with the climate.
I mean, part of my sense of wanting to create, or my sense of purpose around wanting to create a world where my children can live out their purpose, is ensuring that the world's a place that people can live safely. I don't need to. It's so obvious what's happening now with the fires in Los Angeles, the hottest years on record. It's it's a biology issue. It's not made up. It's like we see what's happening. And to the extent that this is human caused, which, there's a lot of great science that shows that it is, we have some power to do something about it, or at least to try to make sure that we don't make it way worse than it needs to be, even at this point. And I feel responsible. For me, it's a midor lador issue. It's like not about my lifetime. It's about my children and my grandchildren, and God willing. And So I was the founding director of a program called the Jewish Greening Fellowship, which was really generously funded by UJ Federation of New York, and which was the first major program to try to address climate change in Jewish organizations. And that is, now in the lifeblood of a few different organizations. Sure. And I sit on the advisory board of Dayenu, which is an incredible cutting edge Jewish organization that tries to combat climate change in bold ways. So this is, it's as simple as that. Right. It's a problem. It's in my vision, it's completely clear. And as a human being and as a Jew, I feel a responsibility to address it.
And circling back to what we've been talking about, it seems like this is one of those collective action things that if everyone recognized their purpose was to behave in a way which, let's say, protected the planet long term, then we would be there.
My feelings on this have evolved. Honestly, yeah. I feel like I really think that it's a matter of political will. I actually think at this point, it's really, there needs to be massive change on the government and on
right, and not just one country. That's the problem. It's a
yeah.
Right. And what do you think is holding back from that? And I know we're both not political analysis here, but
so many things. Listen, at the deepest level, I think it's fear. I think
say more. What do you mean?
I have to confess, my husband's a psychiatrist. Right. I go. That's where I go. I think it's a very hard thing to look in the face. I think it's very, very, very difficult for us. Just like it's difficult for us to imagine an aspirational future, I think it can be difficult for us to imagine the worst case scenarios that haven't yet played out. Let's say that haven't yet historically played out. There's a sense the worst things that have happened, and we've gotten through them, and we know how to deal with them, and I think this is of a different magnitude.
Right. It's and it's probably there's an element of kind of sweeping under the rug, or it's not a clear and present challenge.
Things are really hard.
And so we're
not built that way as human beings.
To think that long term, and also there's other piece of it. And again, I'm sure I could find people on multiple sides of this debate, but I think there's also the piece of what can one human do, right? Everyone's
yes, for sure there's that.
Right.
For sure there's that. I feel that too.
Right.
It's very difficult to know how to confront something that's so big. So then you just want to say, okay, well, it's too much for me. I'm going to focus on the stuff closer to home, which, by the way, is also an okay thing to do.
Right.
I understand it.
Right. Sure. And then while we're in this space and thinking about just our relationship, not only to us potentially destroying nature all around us, but I know you're also someone who likes to be in nature. You're a runner, that kind of piece. Just give us a little of your Torah on what it means to be out in that space of yours.
Oh my gosh, I am my best self when I've spent the morning outside. If I've gone even a half an hour run, I just am better. And there was a book that came out many years ago by this guy named Louv. I think it's L-O-U-V, called Last Child in the Woods, maybe. And he writes about something, he coins a term, nature deficit disorder, which I don't know if it's really a disorder or if it's anything medical, but the notion that not being outside enough is in some way robs us of something fundamental we need, I really resonate with that. I love hiking. When I think about, God willing, someday retiring, I think about long hikes outdoors. I really just love being outside.
Beautiful, right? So in addition to taking a minute to think about the climate this year on Tu B'Shvat, spend a minute getting yourself outside.
Yeah.
Enjoy the outdoors a little bit.
Yeah, even when it's cold. It's
great.
Invigorating.
Yeah, I did it with my friend Simon the other day, and we went on a hike that we usually go on, but you couldn't walk. It was all snow. It just didn't melt. So we just were in snow, just looking at all of nature
awesome
covering.
To do
it was
that?
Oh my God, it filled my heart.
Even the sound of walking in the snow, it's pretty sensational.
Yeah. All right, it's beautiful. All right, so before we close, I just want to take a moment to just mention for those who are watching at home to look out. Last year, we had the amazing merit of airing the Community Leadership Program, which is Hartman's moment where they descend on Israel. The whole summer, there's all different programming, but the one that's meant for lay leaders is the Community Leadership Program, CLP. It's June 25th to July 2nd. I'm talking to Maytal. Please God, we'll air it again this year as well on JBS. So certainly, if you can make it to Israel and have the means, you should go. It's amazing. I had the opportunity in my Hartman time to also be one of the people who helped lead that program, and it's very, very special. And if for some reason you're unable to get to Israel, or it sells out before you get your ticket, which it might probably already has, then hopefully we'll be able to show it to you here on JBS. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work. It's so, as I said before, there's nothing better than seeing people who have been colleagues go on to do their thing, to live their purpose. So, kol hakavod, Justin.
Thank you, Rachel. Really a very treat of my life to learn from you in general, and a special opportunity to learn from you right now as well. Thank you.
Thank you.